I and my wife stayed in a cabin on the north side of the peninsula. We were taking a short vacation. It was a perfect holiday for us. Both of us had time off from work, and the kids were with their grandparents all week while we had some free time. The cabin world was very secluded, and we were at least a 10-minute drive away from any house or store. In this case, we were the only signs of life apart from animals, of course. But even though it was very quiet, it was also very peaceful and exactly what we needed. The first night was truly amazing, and nothing crazy happened, which was all we hoped for. The second night went smoothly as well. On the third day, though, it was a different story. Early in the morning, I went to the store to buy some items we needed. When I went to check out, Takashi became a bit nosy and overly personal, asking me many strange questions. He seemed quite odd to me, but I thought maybe I was overthinking it, and perhaps he was just a bored and lonely old man trying to make basic conversation. I brushed it off and walked out of the store to my car, and he followed me all the way out until I got into my car, staring at me almost the whole time. Okay, now I knew something was off. The man was indeed strange. I thought about how vague it all seemed on the way back, and even told my wife about it. She thought it was strange too, but we eventually forgot about it. When night came, I guess around 7:30 or 8 p.m., there was a weird noise coming from outside. I turned off the TV and asked my wife, Sarah, if she heard it too. She asked me what I heard. I told her I heard something loud outside and I was startled. She didn't hear it. She must have been asleep when it happened or something, because it was quite loud. I got up to investigate, and I looked out the window, and what I saw was very unsettling. There were 3 men approaching our property, maybe 50 feet away, walking towards us. I immediately turned back and told Sarah to run and lock the door while I grabbed his gun. I turned off the lights and made sure we stayed as calm as possible. I wasn't sure how big the threat was, but there was something inside me telling me it wasn't good. I looked back out the same window, but this time they were gone, which made me feel better, as if maybe they had just passed by and happened to run into us. But just as I thought that, there were several knocking sounds coming from various areas of the cabin, one from the door, and 2 others from across the house at Sarah's window. Sarah screamed because the jump scared her. "We know you're in there. Come out here like a man, or we'll have to do this the hard way," said a stranger from outside the door. I told him I had a gun, and he better leave before it's too late. He started laughing as if he didn't care, or thought I was pretending to have a gun. Whatever it was. It made me even more scared, because now I started wondering if they also had weapons. Since why wouldn't you be afraid of someone armed? You must either be a legitimate psychopath or someone armed yourself. I told him I wasn't joking, and I wouldn't warn him again. Then suddenly, the people started kicking the door to try to open it. They actually managed to break it down pretty quickly, and when they did, they were met with my gun to their faces. I actually shot them without even thinking about it, and I hit one of them in their leg. They looked surprised, and the other 2 panicked and begged me not to hurt them, and they took their friend away. Of course, I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. The men never went to the hospital for their injuries. And even to this day, we don't know who they were. There's something wrong with this town and the people in it. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I'm crazy or paranoid. But what I do know is those people were crazy, and I don't even know what they were planning. It's a good thing they didn't have weapons, because things could have been a lot messier. We packed our things the next morning, and we cut our mini vacation short. We never went back to that cabin, and we certainly won't ever go back to that cabin. I was only 16 years old when this happened. My friend Matthew came over and he was staying the night. We usually didn't do much besides playing video games and fooling around at home, doing odd jobs and such. We were in the basement, which was my house. My dad had a bar down there, and a pool table, air hockey table, a big TV, and lots of other cool stuff. It was around 9 o'clock, and we were there, bored and restless. I don't know why, but we thought it would be fun and a good idea to drink a lot of caffeine and try to stay up all night. It wasn't something we usually did, but I don't know what got into us that night. I'm sure it was because we were excited to hang out and have as much fun as possible before school on Monday. Maybe it didn't help that our teenage hormones were suddenly raging out of control. Matthew thought it would be a good idea to go out, he asked. And I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. I mean, it sounded fun to sneak out or whatever, but my parents would be mad if they found out. So I told him I wasn't so sure it was a good idea. "Oh, come on," he said. "It takes some effort to convince." But eventually we had a plan to sneak out. By the way, what we were going to do was in the middle of a deadly winter, and it was freezing cold. Snow was falling heavily, and it was quite thick. I rummaged through my closet to grab some shirts to layer up and keep us warm, and then we set off. We snuck out through the garage door. The first step we took outside, we immediately realized how bad the snowfall had gotten. It had increased slightly from before, but I didn't want to show fear in front of my friends, so I made an impulsive decision. I figured it wasn't a big deal. I turned around and grabbed a few beer glasses from my dad's fridge in the garage, along with some cheap whiskey. Matthew seemed excited about his beer, and we were ready to go. By the way, I live in the boonies, on a dirt road, so there are really no street lights or hardly any lights at all. It was pitch dark, eerie, but also exciting. At the same time, we walked maybe about a mile while sipping our drinks until we started to realize that what we were doing wasn't as exciting as we hoped. We started heading back home and finished off with the last alcohol we drank, tossing the cans into the ditch when suddenly I had an idea popping into my head. There's a trail that I completely forgot about near my house that I've always wanted to explore at night, and it seemed like the perfect time. We were bored, drunk, and there really wasn't anything better to do. He couldn't sleep if we tried it, so we did. I'm not even exaggerating when I tell you that as soon as we reached the entrance to the trail, we saw a dark figure looming ahead. It looked like a man, but at the same time, the weather was so dark that we thought maybe our heads were playing tricks on us. "Hey, idiot, what do you want?" Matthew said at this point we felt fine and maybe a little too confident because of the alcohol. I sort of nudged Matthew after he shouted, and I asked him what's the problem. My dumbass friend here thinks he's tough and has a trace. He said soon as he said that the guy ahead started whistling, which really sent shivers down my spine. It was really weird and scary. "Okay, buddy, I think it's time to go," I said to Matthew. "Yeah, you might be right, buddy," he said. So we turned around and started walking back home, and, of course, Matthew yelled at the guy one last time and called him a jerk. Just seconds after that, we heard 2 loud gunshot sounds being fired towards us, Buddy. "Are you okay?" I asked Buddy. "We don't have time to talk, just run," Matthew said. The chase was on. Somehow Matthew in his drunken state stumbled over a tree stump, and I had to turn back to help him up. At this point, the guy was running towards us. We still had at least 5 minutes running before we were in the clear, so luckily we were faster than him. I'm not sure why he was shooting at us. I felt like he wanted to scare us to teach us a lesson. But again, why was he out there alone in the middle of the woods during a snowstorm around 11 at night? I know we were out there doing the same thing, but he was alone, which was really creepy and weird if you ask me. We kept running and finally made it home. The man stopped following us after a while, and we never knew what to make of what happened. He snuck back inside and talked about the situation only until we fell asleep. It was the craziest thing that ever happened to me. I never snuck out of the house after that night. Never again. I've been working part-time as a janitor at a school for 8 years. This happened in mid-December 2014 in Akron, Ohio because my car was in the shop. I had to walk to and from work for a week. It was really inconvenient. I don't know much about cars at all, but there was something wrong with its brake lines, and something else. I think it was also leaking oil because my car had been leaking oil a few days before. I was on my way home from work, and I had a major accident. There was a pile of snow and mud, and my car veered off the road into the ditch. I was lucky not to get hurt, but the car wasn't so lucky. I hit the speed limit sign, and I hit it hard. After all, I finally made it home. I was less than a mile from home, and this was before I knew my car was leaking oil. So I called a tow truck to come get my car and take it to a local mechanic in my town. That's how I ended up in this situation. Fortunately, I live right next to the school where I work, and it's only about a 5 to 10 minute walk for me. It was a normal school day, and everything was going fine until lunchtime. The school where I work is a middle school that teaches 5th and 6th grade students, so they have recess every day, even in winter. I noticed a man who seemed out of place to me. I didn't recognize him. He was standing there on the sidewalk behind the fence, staring at all the kids in the playground. I almost walked over there and told him to leave, but I wasn't sure if it was my place. It definitely gave me the creeps, but I decided to hold back and keep an eye on him. He eventually walked away after a few minutes, and I didn't see him again until after school on the way home. I had just reached my neighborhood entrance when suddenly I saw someone ahead of me. They were still quite far away, but I immediately knew that they were just standing there, not moving a muscle. I didn't even know if he was staring at me or if I was just overthinking it, but I started to feel scared. Instead of walking towards him, I decided to take a small detour home, so I took a sharp right turn onto the next street. After walking for about a minute, I looked back around a minute later, and he was now following behind me. It only took me a few moments to realize that it was the same person from before. As soon as I put 2 and 2 together, I realized that I was in trouble, and my heart sank into my stomach. Suddenly, he started running towards me. I also started running, and as soon as I reached home, thankfully I was much faster than him because I didn't know what would happen if I didn't. I might have gotten away, but it turned out otherwise. It's clear that I was already home and safe, but he now knew where I lived. Within seconds of entering and trying to catch my breath, he was knocking on my door. "Let me in, or I swear it will happen," he said. I was panicking. I pulled out my phone as I called the police. I waited for them to arrive, praying the whole time that he wouldn't try to bash open a window and do who knows what. Thankfully, it didn't happen. What did happen, though, is something I'll never forget. He took a chair from my front porch and placed it in front of the door, and he stood on it so he could look in through the window towards me. I'll never forget the look on his face. It was a chilling smile, the smile of a sadistic and very cold man who was extremely curious. I was terrified of him. The police showed up less than 5 minutes later and thankfully apprehended him. But I worried for a long time that when he got out of jail, he would come back for round 2. I'm still paranoid about it, even to this day, that he might come back while I'm asleep or something in the middle of the night